Okay, so now we're going to mark the lumbar spine. So here's the full spine. We're just looking at the lumbar section. This is the right side and the left side. This line we learned last time is the sacral baseline. Now we want to compare the fifth and the fourth and the third and second first lumbar with that. So if we look at the fifth lumbar, you want to see, is it sitting at an angle or is it parallel with that? So it's slightly off. You can see it by checking the base of the pedicles, by standing back and just looking at it, coming back in, checking two other like points like the top of the vertebra or the bottom. And it's difficult. You kind of have to, it's an art to it. But I'm going to pick this. Sorry. And now looking at these two lines, you can see that this line is further away from this line than this line is than this one. So there's more of a wedge here. And if we look at the spinous processes, you can see that these appear to go to the right, although you want to try not to use spinous processes as your guide because they're often bent. We prefer to use pedicles. If you look up here, you can see that this pedicle is really narrow and this one's wide open. This one's relatively narrow and this one is wide open. So we know that these two vertebrae are rotating to the right. Generally speaking, the lumbars all rotate the same way because the way the vertebrae fit together, there's not a lot of play. So it's not like in the thoracic spines, the way the facets are shaped, they can rotate more. The lumbars can't really counter-rotate that much. So these are PRs. I'm going to call this one a PR. So the first letter is P for posterior. Right is from the perspective of the spinous process. And the wedge on this side is a PRI. So that's the listing for this lumbar. So I want to talk a little bit about the pedicles. If you think of my nose as the spinous process and my eyes as the pedicles, as I rotate my nose to the right, you see less of this eye and more of this eye. You also see more of this part of my face. So this would be a PR. This pedicle would be narrower and this one would be wider. This one is closer to the edge of my face. This one is further away from the edge of my face. So you can see more of this edge. So think of it like a face. So this is PRI. Now let's go up until we see the spine. So it's going to go off, 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 and then where does it start to correct itself again? That's where you call it a level base, and then the next one that goes off. You can see that this patient has a curve going this way, and in the thoracics, she starts to even out. So we'll get into this more when we get into the thoracics. But basically, you don't mark the film again until they reach a level. Although, we could say that this one reaches a level. So we're going to go back. Okay, we're going to mark this. So you do the bottom vertebra first, the one you're comparing this one to. So now we're going to do this one. And so this is a PRS of L2. This is a PRI of L5, and this is a PRS of L2. Let's just look at the lateral for a moment. When you're looking at the lateral, what you want to be looking for are any of the vertebra tipping backwards from the one below. And you can't see too much of that happening at 5. I'm not 100% sure here where the line is because it could be here or it could be here. But for right now, we're just going to call this relatively even. But if you get up here, if you look at L2, you can really see that L2 is going posterior off of L3. So that's not the only reason we marked it, but you're taking it into consideration. Okay, now we're going to come over here. We look at this lumbar spine. You can see that 5 is posterior to the sacrum. Right? You could also have an anterior sacrum. Sometimes you're not sure which you're looking at, but from all the other motion palpation symptoms of this patient, I think it's a posterior 5th lumbar. But if you look at each vertebra, they're slightly posterior, especially 3. Okay, so we're just going to we're going to move over here. So here's your baseline for the sacrum. And looking at L5 and figuring out the very bottom of the pedicles and the position of the vertebra, I'm going to draw my line here. This pedicle is more narrow than this one. So this one is closer to the edge, this one's wider, so I'm going to call this a PRS of L5. And then it keeps going off, and it doesn't come back around in the lumbar. So we're just going to leave this the way it is. It's a PRS of L5.